Let's talk about this new panic wave going around the veteran community. Because right now, veterans are getting blasted with fear headlines like the VA is investigating 1 million DBQs. The VA is cracking down on fraud. If you use a third party company, you're screwed. And it's got all of y'all freaked out. Veterans are messaging me saying, DP, am I about to lose my rating? DP, is the VA coming after everyone? DP, should I be worried because I used a private DBQ or Nexus? So I'm going to give you my honest take, not the TikTok clickbait take, not the YouTube fear mongering version. I watched the committee hearing myself. I did my due diligence, and I'm going to break it down in plain English like we always do here on this channel. First off, let's be clear. Yes, the VA is talking about fraud. Yes, DBQs are being looked at harder. But what a lot of people are doing right now is twisting that into a if you've ever used a third party company, you're cooked. And that's not true. At the same time, I'm also not going to sit here and tell you, don't worry about it. You're protected because some of y'all are getting dangerously comfortable with those year rules. The 5-year rule, the 10-year rule, the 20-year rule. And I need you to understand some things. Those protections, they work if your evidence is authentic and credible. If fraud is proven, there is no protection. Some creators out here are telling veterans if you've had your rating for 10 years, you're safe. No, that's not how the law works. The law literally says unless fraud is involved. So, yes, normally the VA can't just sever a connection after 10 years. They can't just reduce stabilized ratings without proper evidence. And after 20 years, your rating is usually protected. But if fraud is proven, that's the exception. So if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I'm good, I've had my rating for 12 years, that doesn't mean anything if fraud is ever attached to your evidence. Now, am I saying the VA is about to mass accuse veterans of fraud? No. But I am saying you need to stop repeating these rules like they're bulletproof armor because they're not. Now, let's talk about what the hearing actually said because the internet is already lying about it. There's a bill called the Fraud in VA Disability Exams Act of 2025. And in the hearing, the VA straight up said they do not support the bill.
VA appreciates the intent of H.R. 5723, the Fraud in VA Disability Exam Act of 2025. However, VA does not support this bill.
That's important. Why? Because the bill would require the VA to notify veterans if their DBQ is suspected of fraud. The VA doesn't want that.
VA is concerned about the requirements to notify individuals whose DBQs are suspected of fraud.
The VA's current process is basically if we suspect fraud, we order a new exam. That's the workaround. Instead of saying we suspect fraud, they just send you to another exam and let the exam override your private DBQ.
Under current practice, if fraud is suspected, VA typically orders a new exam and revises ratings as needed to ensure fairness.
That's already happening in real life. And the other major thing the VA said, and arguably, this is actually kind of weird because if you think about it, it would make sense for the bill to pass, which would give you due diligence and time and awareness of what's happening versus their workaround. So they're not necessarily siding with you. They're actually trying to keep things more favorable to them, despite what people are saying. Now, another major thing the VA said was they don't support the bill because it would restrict their ability to reopen or change benefit decisions unless the person is convicted of fraud. meaning the VA can't touch the rating unless there's a conviction.
VA does not support the proposed restriction of reopening or changing benefit decisions based on investigations unless the individual is convicted of fraud.
That is literally a whole process. The VA's response is basically saying convictions take too long. That's too high of a bar.
The time required and the higher bar of evidence needed to secure a fraud conviction eliminates VA's ability to correct errors in a shorter time frame than needed for a federal criminal proceeding to unfold, potentially harming veterans who are not involved in fraudulent activity.
They literally admitted that they want the ability to adjust ratings faster than a federal criminal case can unfold. So, what does this mean in plain English? It means that the VA wants to keep the power to take action based on suspicion without waiting for a court. That should tell you everything you need to know, which again makes it to where the bill is actually not what people are making it to be and actually protects the veteran, giving them due process in a matter like this that potentially can take your benefits that you have earned, that you fought for, that you've had, that you depend on. Now, let's address the big, scary buzzword that everybody is using: AI. I've seen creators saying in a few months, the VA is rolling out AI and they're going back 16 years to check for fraud.
So we've developed a Power BI tool that should be ready this year that's going to be able to analyze a little over 1 million DBQs, public-facing DBQs that have been scanned going all the way back to 2010.
And I'm here sitting like, do y'all even listen to the VA? Because in the hearing, the VA literally said this tool should be ready in 2026.
This particular legislation, it seems to me, would make sense if we had that capability.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're just, as far as technology goes, we're not there for implementation of this.
We should.
That makes sense. I can have that conversation with the committee if you're supporting what I just said.
I believe that I am supporting what you just said, unless my colleague kicks me under the table. But I think that the electronic piece should be available in 26, so in this fiscal year.
They don't even have said tool ready. I have a background in technology. I literally beta tested the mobile app we have now for the VA to see our ratings and send communications and all that back in 2019. It took a long time to roll this out. I come from technology. It's my background. I did this with Homeland Security when I worked for the government and oversaw projects in technology and collaborated with the VA at Apple headquarters in California. And I can tell you that these things are not what they seem sometimes, and cost overrun and timelines are hardly ever met. So they don't even have set tools. So where are these creators getting this few months? Did the VA tell them that? Or are they just making it up for clicks to scare you like they always do? Because here's the reality. The VA has been working on tools forever, like I just told you. And half of the time, these tools never work, never launch, or get delayed into oblivion. So let me remind you, in 2022, the VA proposed major changes to the mental health ratings, to sleep apnea ratings, to tinnitus ratings. And here we are, years later, still waiting. No final action date, no implementation date, nothing. Yet creators are fear mongering every few months with this is happening tomorrow and status quo. So when people act like AI is dropping tomorrow, don't buy it. The VA can barely update their own website without crashing it. Now, here's the part where my technology background kicks in. The biggest risk isn't that you're going to get caught of committing fraud. The biggest risk is that you're going to get caught in the crossfire because the VA is incompetent. We have OIG reports showing the VA has a massive error rate. Errors in evaluating medical opinions, errors in how they request exams, errors in how they interpret evidence. And you're telling me that those same people are going to train an AI model? Let's be real. Who's training it? The same people who couldn't implement the PAC Act correctly? The same people who had to amend the 21-1 manual nonstop because they kept screwing up? And even then, they still messed it up? So the concern shouldn't be, oh no, the VA is going to perfectly detect fraud. The concern should be, oh no, the VA is going to incorrectly flag legitimate veterans. Because AI is not magic, sadly. It's only as good as the data that it's trained on. And if the VA's process is already sloppy, the AI is going to inherit that sloppiness. So, yes, veterans could absolutely get flagged who did nothing wrong, not because they're guilty, but because the system is dumb. Now, let me say this loud for the people in the back. If you filed a legitimate claim with legitimate symptoms and legitimate evidence, and your DBQ is defensible, you're probably fine. But who should be worried? The DBQ mill companies, the claim shark companies, the ones that tell veterans guaranteed 100% if you work with us, the ones selling DBQs like it's fast food, the ones that tell you do not go to your CMP exam. Let's talk about that. If a company is telling you to not show up to the one appointment where you can advocate for yourself, that's not strategy. That is a red flag because every veteran knows your CMP exam is literally the most important day of the entire claim process. So, why would they tell you to skip it? Because they can't defend their DBQ, because they know it won't hold up, because it's copy and paste garbage, because the doctor didn't actually examine you, because it's inflated, because it's not real. And I've seen it. I saw a comment months ago where a veteran asked one of these companies, I have a Nexus letter. What should I do with it? And the company replied, buy another one from us. That tells you everything. That's not claims help. That's a scam. This is why we focus so much on acing your VA claim, on acing your CMP. You don't ace something unless you put the work in. No shortcuts. We show up to our exams. We present ourselves for a reason. So, yeah, if you bought one of these guaranteed DBQ mill company situations, one solution, trick, insider, whatever you want to call it, you might want to start sweating just a little bit because those are the people the VA is trying to crack down on, not the veterans who use legitimate private providers. And here's another part of the hearing that, quite frankly, blew my mind. When they were asked what fraud indicators look like, they said things like missing signatures and exams conducted more than 100 miles away.
The information that's required in the signature block is missing, or the examiner's address is, say, greater than 100 miles away from where the veteran lives.
And I'm sorry, but that's just stupid because the VA sends veterans more than 100 miles away all the time. So now what? A veteran cannot use their free will to drive to a provider because their VA doctor refuses to fill out a DBQ for them? A veteran can't go out of state because there's no specialist near them? That's ridiculous. That's not fraud. That's the reality of the healthcare system that we are in. Veterans in rural areas drive those distances to get to the VA. So if those are the metrics, then yes, a lot of innocent veterans could get flagged. So here's the bottom line. The VA's fraud talk is real, but most of the fear online is exaggerated clickbait. What you should actually be worrying about isn't the VA hunting you down like a criminal. What you should be worried about is getting flagged by a broken system that cannot tell the difference between a legitimate DBQ and a DBQ mill scam. So if your evidence is defensible, evidence based, medically supported, you're good. If you use one of these guaranteed DBQ mills and they told you to skip your exam, then yeah, maybe you should be worried. And if you want to know what to do if the VA ever flags your DBQ or calls you in for another exam, that's what I'm covering in part 2 of this series. Because there are ways to protect yourself. Drop your questions below and I will address them with my team. And if you found this helpful, share it with another veteran because the amount of misinformation out there right now is insane. And this is why we create this content to reach them. So help us get the message out. All right, I'll see you in the next one. See you in the comments.